Hello, everyone, and welcome to the D4 conference, the tabletop conference presented by San Diego Comic-Con. Today, we're going to be talking about world building. And thanks to all of our amazing team putting together this, we have three amazing creators in which I'm very happy to know all of you very well. And so when everyone said, it's like, oh, here's the panel we're proposing for world building, and I was like, yeah, yes, all of you. Because I can legitimately say that I've had the pleasure of at least working on a world with each one of you individually for one project or another. And as a result, I'm going to feel very comfortable just basically handing off this amazing conversation for people who are interested in, like, not only how do you make worlds, but then how do you get it out there, right? That's actually the thing I'm really interested in talking about is this, that in tabletop, world building is a huge element. It's the pivotal thing in role-playing games. But then for the first thing that I'm really interested in talking about is, like, how do you get players to engage in your world? Because it's one thing to have it up in here and like make it into something, but then how do you take that step of getting someone else excited about playing inside of your space? So yeah, let's just hop right into it. So I mean, first of all, I think we should probably make sure people know who you are though as well too. So Banana, would you like to start off the introductions for today?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I'm Banana Chan, she, her, they, them. I am the owner and co-founder of a small RPG slash board game publishing company called Game in a Curry. I also design, write, do all the things with board games and RPGs. And I'm very excited to be here.
Spencer.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Spencer Stark. I'm a game designer, best known for Icarus and Alice is Missing, Kids on Brooms. And I'm so excited to be here and talk about world building, my favorite thing.
And Tanya.
Hello, my name is Tanya DePass. I am on Rivals Waterdeep. I've done a little bit of writing for WotC, Green Ronin, and Monte Cook Games, but a lot of people may know me as the creator and creative director of Into the Motherlands, a new Afrofuturist sci-fi RPG.
Awesome. Oh, so clean and concise, all of you. It's amazing. And my name is Ivan Van Norman. I'll be your moderator today. Again, I want to revisit this question. It's like, world building is magnificent, and we could talk about that concept and creation, but you've all done something unique, whether it's, Jiangxi, Into the Motherlands, Alice is Missing. Like, when you're building these things, how do you make it so that it feels like you're transitioning this into a player perspective, right? Again, it's something to put that world onto paper, but how do you imagine it getting into a player's hands when it comes to your process?
I can talk about because Alice is very modern, but it has a very specific world that you're playing in. I wanted to I want to give people touchstones of what they could use as reference for it, right? So like in the book, it talks about what the inspirations are. So it gives people this like headspace of, okay, this is the kind of feeling that this place has, right? And then also there's an intro card in the game that you read aloud that sort of like sets the scene for the game. And so in that, I was trying to like give this gateway, right? Like this door. That card is like the door into the world that you're about to go into. And so by giving a single point of entry for that and allowing that to sort of like branch out into different places, and different concepts, but giving them one path to go down in order to enter that like world, was the hope that would make it accessible to people that that had no idea what they were walking into.
Yeah, so like a strong prompt, basically, like you're giving them
Like a
some
direction,
place to
yeah.
a direction in which to go to.
Like
Because
a path to walk down, yeah, as opposed to just like giving them a whole world. I don't know, for me that was like that was the aim, right? Was to like, instead of like dumping a whole world on their shoulders, like give them one path to walk down, show them some things on that path, and then let that inspire the rest of the exploration.
Yeah, I agree with that. And to sort of go off of that, I kind of want to talk about like media touchstones and having context for players, so that way they can have something to anchor themselves into the world. So a media touchstone is something like, this movie that you've seen or a TV show that you've seen that could be similar to what your game is about, or like a novel, or any sort of piece of media that a player can look at and be like, oh, I recognize this. I know what to expect with this world I'm about to, encounter or embrace.
For Motherlands, we did that too, but we also kind of tied it to an actual historical figure. So anyone who's kind of nerdy for that can be like, oh, Mansa Musa, I think I really dig this dude. But then it was like, we just kind of gave people a tease of what they could see in the world. And we're in that odd position of we also are live streaming it as we're developing it. So people are getting to learn the characters, getting to learn the cultures along with us developing it. So it's like this weird parallel development moment. And so there's already a tie-in from the Twitch stream where people want to learn more about what we're doing. And it doesn't hurt that we've got just a great cast kind of bringing this to life before you ever see a book. And now that has turned around and generated interest in the book.
So what I'm hearing is that between all three of you, what you're doing to kind of help ease players into your world to show them is that you are giving them relatable places in which to start, right? Whether that's a media touchstone, an intro card, or a live stream that literally gives you an example of play of what's inside of the world. It's like whether it's a preset story or a preset gateway, that's a nice way to not like overwhelm someone with a pretty, what do they call it? It's like brand language, right? Like just a bunch of terms, locations, places,
jargon and
jargon.
Stuff. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. That's the correct term to go on to it, like brand jargon, right?
Yeah.
Which is so easy when you're getting into that creator mindset to be like, okay, and here's the 5 nations, and here's their names, and here's how they're politically tied to each other, and oh, here's the industrial build on all around of these. It's like, where do you start? Right. And I think all three of you kind of made a really strong point on how to do that.
Well, yeah, and two, like there's some players that are gonna love that, right? There's some players that are gonna really eat that up and are gonna get into it. And I think that there's a lot of players who don't really care, at least at first, right? If they're coming into a new like they just want to play the game that they've set out to play. They don't really want to do the whole historical back. So it's like as a GM or as a designer, like we have to give tools to hook people. We have to use techniques to hook them in so that then they care about those things. If all of a sudden it matters to them, because of their character, if you're able to tie stuff in with their character or whatever, like if you make it matter to them, it's a lot easier to like do lore dumps, right? If you just do a lore dump for lore dump's sake, like I've been in those games, and they're really hard because I don't know. I honestly don't know what's happening.
Right.
As much as I want to know, I don't know what's happening. Because I just sat down at the table to play a game at a convention and have no idea what the 5 warring nations are and all that stuff.
Well, and speaking of lore dumps and having too much information all at one point and getting too far, are there sacrifices that any three of you have made when it comes to building worlds out? Like, is there something where it's just really hard to let go, but you know that it is better, one, for a player entry point and for the world in general?
Yeah, we actually went through that with Motherlands. We're kind of deciding, kind of how many cultures people would get to play, how many cultures people would get to encounter. And we had this really good idea, which we may put back in, but at least for the stream and for now was like, what if gods were mortal and they were walking among the people of Vitoa? And it was like, this is really dope. But also, how do you do it so it's convincing, it doesn't seem weird, and also so you're not offending anyone if you accidentally touch on an actual religious practice? So as much as we wanted to put that in there right now, we're just like, let's shelve this for now and we'll have to come back to it. But we all had that idea of like, this would be so cool what if like one of the cultures is literally descended from the gods and they're actually like immortal or something.
Yeah, we had a similar thing with Jiangxi where we wanted to get into like all the detail about Fulu and Taoist talismans and like Taoist like spell making, but obviously it's like a lot of stuff to fit into a game that's just about like a couple of settings or like one sort of like world, and so we had to cut off a lot of the the word count and end up like putting all of that in like the sources or like the glossary, so that people who are like interested in like, you know, reading more or learning more about it would just like go to the sources or glossary and just be like, oh, okay, like this is where I can learn more about this kind of stuff.
I think an interesting thing for me that I found lets me engage with the lore of a game more, and this sort of relates to like throwing some stuff out as a designer. Um, uh, the more the players are, the more the players feel an emotional connection to the world in which they're playing. I think the more buy-in you get, at least at the beginning of a campaign or the beginning of a session. Um, and so in Alice, for example, there are 5 suspects and 5 locations that sort of are built into the world that we're playing in, right? And they have, and it would be very easy to go in and give each of those more detailed like information than just their name or their archetype for the suspect, or their or like just the location name on the locations. But instead, by holding back there and saying, I'm going to give you some information. I'm going to give you their name and what like kind of what their archetype is for this story, or I'm going to give you the location name, just the name and an image that represents that place. But you, as a player, get to bring the information about that person or place to our session that we're playing. People get tied more to those. The people resonate more with those locations and places. It's a different thing reading it than it is like coming up with it. You feel a little bit of ownership as a player over it, or not ownership as much as like, I don't know, emotional tie. There's something there that like ties you more to that thing because you made it up. And I think that you know, extrapolating from that, things like Blades in the Dark, or you know, some Powered by the Apocalypse games, or some more of these like narrative focused games that give you, to like take Blades as an example, that does have info about a location, but it doesn't give you like it doesn't have like a huge setting book, right? It just gives you like, here are the district names, and like they have really evocative names, and you can kind of make up the stuff that's there. Like here's like the, you know, the Shattered Isles or whatever, and you're like able to sort of get a little bit, enough that you're able to like jump off, enough that you're not just making up from whole cloth, but not so much that you have to read 50 pages just to know everything about this place. And the game kind of gives you the option of like engaging with the pieces that it gives you, or just kind of doing your own thing based on like inspired by that name or place or description. And so I think there's a balance for me, right? Of like, how do we give the players enough that they feel like they're not working from zero, but not give them so much that they feel overwhelmed by the amount of content that they have to consume just to understand this place that they're in, or this group that they're engaging with.
Yeah, I think it's definitely interesting because there are 2 ways of sort of like looking at like world building in terms of like tabletop RPGs, right? So there's like this aspect of you're building the world together because it's a collaborative experience where you're doing this all together at the table. And then there's the world building that the writers have to do in terms of like the lore and the settings and like, you know, all the stuff in the background. And so I think that when like a lot of the time when like writers are writing for writing books or writing lore, the GM is reading this, and the GM is taking all of this stuff in, if there's a GM. Sometimes there's no GM, but like a lot of the time when the GM is, you know, going through this stuff, or the facilitator is going through this stuff, they're sort of like using this stuff to influence their gameplay with the table. And so using that stuff to act as prompts later on for like more world building at the table is like an interesting process.
Yeah, I mean, you look at something like Belonging Outside Belonging games, right? I don't know if any of you have played BOB games, but they basically hand sheets to players that are like about places. And they go like, this place is kind of like this, make some choices about this place. And then whenever this place comes up, you're the person who gets to kind of describe what it's like. And it's a really interesting way of going like, here's just enough. Here's just enough to like work from, and here's some choices you should make about this place so that we're all on the same page. But like, there is a Banana, to your point, there is still world building there, right? Because it isn't just going make up the place you're in. It's saying here is a place and here are all the options that you can choose for that place, or here are all here's the palette upon which we are painting that place with, right? And as a designer, you get to choose what that palette is like. Even if you're giving players the tools to build the kind of lore on their own, you can do it from a place that like injects a little bit of what the flavor of what you want while still involving the players in some way so that they feel tied to it as well. There's a sweet spot there.
So what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of great opportunities when world building to not only just provide a world, right? But more importantly, provide the tools in which for you to make your own world, which is so definitive of role-playing games, right? We're here to tell stories. We're here to go and be immersed inside of a world and then tell stories inside of that world. And these kind of like here be dragons kind of stuff you're talking about, whether that's physically on a map of like unexplored areas, like just the suggestion of a continent, right? Like in Gods of Metal Ragnarok now, we're literally making the map and there are areas that just, you know what? They're just going to be there. Like, we don't know what they are or what they're doing. They might have a name, they might not. But even classic maps like Exandria, they all just have suggestions of greater worlds inside of them than what they are. So, you know, being able to define that on a role-playing sense and being able to be aware of that as a designer to not over communicate, but yet not under communicate at the same time is really interesting. And so just being able to hear you kind of continue to elaborate on like what that means to define a game for a player, and we can answer this question now, or we can keep diving into it. Tanya, I don't know if you had more you wanted to add to that particular topic.
No, I'm just sitting here like, I should be taking notes.
Taking notes.
If you see me looking aside, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just taking good notes.
But the question I wanted to follow up on that is because if there is Here Be Dragons, right, which is so important for the player, we're also seeing in the world of role-playing games right now, like derivatives, like expanded worlds that are branching off into other media, right? Like there's this wonderful world in which other properties are starting to look at role-playing games and are like, wow, you guys have really in-depth worlds. This is so interesting seeing all this stuff build out. How do you flip the script on that at that point? Because these properties, comic books, TVs, all that, they require characters and stories in order to build, right? But yet when you're developing it, you want the players to make those. So can you all speak to that a little bit? I know all of you are touching the space a little bit. Otherwise, I wanted to ask the question. So
we're running into no, that's not the right word. We're running into, because for those who don't know, I'm working on the RPG based on N.K. Jemisin's trilogy. And, you know, here's this world that's post-apocalyptic. There's so much rich lore to the world, but how do you do that without bringing those characters over and writing for her? Because these are the characters she's given us, but we don't want to give them a voice they never had to begin with. So here's kind of what you can become in this world, but we're not letting you be these canon characters. They may show up, they may not, but the whole idea is we're just giving you this world that N.K. Jemisin has built. It is your job to then go run around in it and create characters, create NPCs, and here's an adventure to start. But the whole idea is everyone loves her world building, everyone loves the characters they've come across, but their story's done, it's in the book. Your story as the GM, your story as the player will be to go create a new adventure, but in that land. So it's giving players and GMs a lot more autonomy than some of us are used to in role-playing games. Because, you know, like with all the classics, it's like, here's your character, here's what you do, kind of here's your go kill things in a dungeon if you want. But this is a whole new world, literally, for folks to go play in. And it'll be interesting for folks who know the books really well versus someone who may not have read the books, but they're just a big RPG player. They're like, oh, new system, new game. Well, not new system, but new world to play in. How will they approach it versus someone who has devoured these books over and over and over and can't wait to go run around in it? So
yeah, that sounds like I I really agree with that, because it sounds a lot like a similar process that we had when we were working with Dune Adventures in the Imperium, where we were given basically the IP. Here are the constraints. Here are the things that you can basically talk about, basically like, have in the game, in the books. But
Such an
here are the
amazing book,
things.
by the way. Just want to heap a little praise on you. That book is wonderful. And as a Dune fan, that is the timeline book I've been wanting for my entire career as a fan. So awesome job, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, it was like really interesting working with an IP in general, just like, in role-playing games. So this is like my first time working with an IP for a role-playing game, a pre-existing IP. And it was just like learning about what Tanya, you were saying, where, you have this world that you're provided, and you have to make sure that the players understand that they can play around in it, do what they want in this world that's already been created by another creator. But at the same time, making sure that you as a writer, you as like, a producer, or like, a publisher, don't interject your own sort of like, things that are not relevant to the world that's already been created. So it's interesting to work with, for sure.
I think on kind of the flip side of that, like the coming at there have been a number of announcements from Scion to World of Darkness of like people taking properties and wanting to shop them around to get adapted into other media, RPGs being adapted into other media. And I think that there's an interesting there's an interesting hurdle there, and Ivan, you were kind of talking about it, in that like if you're taking a game and making it into property in another IP, whether it's a book or a comic book or a TV show or a movie or whatever, like those need characters, they need strict lore. So how do you do that? And I think that there's a couple of ways in which, as a designer, as we start to like move in, as we start to like hopefully see more of this happening, and and are looking at our games in a way that they can have derivatives made from them. Like I think that those mediums are their own. We should treat those mediums as their own mediums. And what I mean by that is that like there is when you're writing, if you're writing a screenplay inside of a world that already exists if you're writing Tales from the Loop, right, which wasn't from the RPG, but was from the book that the RPG is based on, they're looking at what are stories that could be told inside of this world, right? Not like what is they're using it in the same way that players use it. And I think that that's kind of the key here, is like, if you're moving into that world of derivatives in some way, it's probably good practice to treat the thing that you're making as though it is a session of that game, and letting things evolve out organically, and then putting structure on that, right? Because like RPGs, you can have a really good GM who's really good at 3-act structure for every session, and they are a master wizard. And even then, it's like it's really difficult. But as a writer, or as a person who's working on the derivative of a game, like looking at the way in which we can take what the structure of a hero's journey is, or take the structure of a TV show or whatever, and apply that. What does that look like for our game, right? And then elaborate from there. And Ben, I know because you posted on Twitter that you've been reading Save the Cat, which is
it's so good.
It's so good, right? Okay, we had this conversation before, but yeah, it's like Save the Cat is like, not only really, if you don't know what Save the Cat is, it's a book, it's a screenwriting book, and who's it by? It's by oh god,
Blake.
Yeah, Blake something. Anyway, shout out to Blake for Save the Cat. Basically, it teaches you how to structure story. And I use it for role-playing games. I use it when I run sessions. But it also it's for screenwriting. So I think that there is like this shared DNA that's really interesting to me, and I think makes RPGs a really appealing source, just like books and comic books have been for the last
Yeah.
30, 50 years.
You could think about like world building, not unlike building a house, right? And
Right.
writers, game masters, and screenwriters are all architects, right? And they all design the building in different ways, and you can attack it from different territories. Sometimes your story first, like a writer does when they build something like Shadow and Bone, right? They have these characters that are going through this pathway and this world evolves around them, right? And then you have game masters who take a world and then make it so that players can live and define a place of agency and choice as they go through the process, right?
And I think something like The Expanse really shows that, right? Like you watch The Expanse and you're like, oh, this is kind of a game master. Like this is kind of what a game master would do in its approach to world building, its approach to like design.
We've all watched those movies and shows where we've like, this is a great campaign, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, the thing that I'm always going to be curious about and wanted to get into it, and I didn't mean to interrupt your thought process, but I really did want to kind of just overemphasize that like game masters can become people like book writers and screenwriters if they just take those tools and knowledge and apply them into this sense of world building, that because of the shared DNA that you're talking about, that really the possibilities are infinite when it comes to world building.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of doing the same thing, right? As like when you go to write a book, you're laying out your lore, right? And if you're not if in RPGs, if you're not doing it, then if you're not doing it, then the writer of the role-playing game has given you something to use. You look like the source books for 7th Sea or something like that. You just have these like tomes of places, and you can pull pieces from that. I think it's another piece that's like maybe important to note is there are lots of source books for games, and if you're a designer, like writing a source book is not necessarily, it's not detrimental, I don't think, to like this collaborative process that we're talking about with players. It's just I think that approaching them as inspiration for the game master rather than like rule of law for the game master is probably an easier way to make them accessible for people. I don't know if any of you have like had to do like source books or have used source books for games, but
I worked a little bit on 7th Sea.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I worked a little bit on Kitai. So yeah, I agree. Yeah, like I think that a lot of the stuff that
Banana, you've just done so much. I can't. You're just so talented. I just can't keep track of all the cool shit you've done.
I'm just like here and there, wherever they need me. So yeah, I would agree with that. I think that like, having all the stuff that's written out in terms of lore, in terms of settings, like that's, and like NPCs, right, too, where you're giving the GM like things to use for their campaign, not necessarily like the, not for them to just like pour out like every bit of detail and every bit of like, little bit of, fact or whatever, unless like the factoid is like relevant to the campaign or something. But like I think it's useful for GMs to like read through stuff and then take bits and pieces that they think would be great for their game. Sometimes I think that like one way to make like a table a little bit too overwhelmed at times is just like overloading them with information that's like not really necessary, and like it doesn't really drive them towards the end goal, or like drive them towards completing their quest or completing like whatever is important at the time. So I think just like sprinkling a little bit of that in is great, but not just not just like listing,
not lore dumping. Yeah,
just like not lore dumping, or like not not like reading from the source book, unless like there are cool NPCs that are there that like you want to just like add in or something like that.
Yeah, I was thinking about not lore dumping, but adding in details that may not be in the source books. One thing I've always noticed are like little cultural details are always missing, like food and mode of dress or something like that. So that's something you can always add in as a game master or even as a storyteller, because how often do you sit and think about what's this character's favorite food, or what's this culture's favorite food, or what's the weather like there? And that's just little bits of, I hesitate to say realism because we're not building real worlds. But it's something that can make things come more alive as well.
Immersion, right?
It can ground you. Yeah, it can ground you in the world.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that like just having those, like what you were saying, Tanya, like those anchor points is really great, because then that really immerses the players as well. So that way they're just like, oh, okay, I can see what this world looks like. I can, like, using your senses, right? Like, so instead of just what is it saying where like people are don't like show more instead of telling, just like,
Yeah.
showing
Show
people
instead of
like what
tell,
this
yeah.
world, showing people like what this world looks like, versus just like telling all this, all about like all this random stuff that doesn't really matter to the campaign or immersion.
Well, and we talk about show don't tell as a technique in other mediums too, right? In books, in screenplays, especially. Like, that is the age old adage of like show don't tell, because people understand more when they see something happening, or they see, like, instead of having a lore dump where where an NPC is telling everybody stuff about this world in some way, like describing it in these little details as they're going about this place can help it feel more alive. And it does the same thing, right? But it like allows you to feel more immersed, for it to feel more organic.
I actually love to take that element a little bit and actually dive into that a lot further. Like, between the three of you, like, what is your kind of favorite show don't tell? Like, what's a mechanism that you would love, that you like using or have used in the past, or it's like your favorite go-to of like showing something in the world versus just, putting it in a 2-column, 4-paragraph lore dump kind of an attitude?
Way. I think a show don't tell that came up actually during the stream of Motherlands was Eugenio Vargas, who's our storyteller, is very animated and does a great job of showing us verbally what's going on, and in talking about kind of the Hyanal city and the things that are expected, and kind of giving this very visual description of these hyena-like people scurrying around studying and doing science and kind of experimenting on things. It was very visual versus here you see a brown and black hyena type person with a book and they're standing at a podium lecturing. That is boring. But the things in which he can verbally tell us, and depending on how you process information, you could see this bustling city of these cat-like people, and it wasn't just a very dry, boring step by step as you walk through this city description. And it was just a way to give people a cue, because it's all theater of the mind for us right now in doing the show. And there's no real way to kind of show people what it looks like until they have a book in their hand. So visually describing and doing it well is a way that we are doing that, versus just 30 pages of this Hyanal studied for 20 years in university, and this is what they got their 20 degrees in.
So instead of focusing on one path, you're literally showing like fishmongers and scholars and entertainers all on the same pathway. This is kind of why I think town squares are a real common show don't tell. It's like you walk into the town square and there's 15 different cultural things going on, and you get to kind of get an idea of what that town's culture is, right? Because you're in the hub of it. Spenser, any fun show don't tells that you have in your hat?
I have three kind of things that I think about when you say that. One of them is actually relates to that, and that like festivals, when you arrive at a place, like knowing what kind of festival they might be having. You don't want to do this like every time you arrive and has a festival, but if there is something, because that'd be weird. But when you arrive at a new place, like if it makes sense for that moment to have some sort of thing that they celebrate, we immediately know what they care about. Is it a festival to a god? If it is, then we know what god they worship and what god is that and why is it important to them, right? You can show all of that through the details of that. I think on a more micro scale, something that I really enjoy when GMs do, and that I try and do when I GM, is not just use the language, not just like speak to the players through what the character is saying, but also either describe or use my own body language to show them kind of how they hold themselves or how they feel in that moment. It's a visual display of something that it's something we would see if we were watching it on screen, but not something that we might normally get
A
from.
glimpse of body language inside of the world.
Yeah. Like we're seeing how it physically makes them feel, and that's more of a micro character to character thing. But it tells you, how's this person feeling about what I'm saying to them, right? If they're leaning in, if their shoulders are in, and they're, and their eyes are wide and they're staring at you, they're probably, there's something that's a different energy than being, than feeling
Aloof.
hesitant. Yeah, aloof or hesitant, or even even like not shy, but like anxious, right? Like if they're holding their shoulders tense, if you're holding your shoulders tense while you're speaking, that tells me something different about that character, about how they're raised, where they come from, and about how they're reacting to what you're saying to them. And then the third piece I wanted to sort of touch on is not the same as like the traditional show don't tell, but in any maps and mini games I run, and I'm working on a game right now that mechanizes that, so puts it in to the game. But I have what's called a lens. I don't have it with me, but it's a little like piece. I originally started just using like a paper football, just a triangle that's like a paper football, but I've printed one. I have a 3D printer, so I like printed a little like plastic piece that sort of makes do. But essentially, whenever we're running maps and minis, I put a lens on the table, and when it's your turn and you're doing your thing, you move that lens to what the camera is seeing, and you describe what we're seeing in that scene. So the GM can do it when they're describing stuff with those maps and minis out, but the players can do it too. They grab it and be like, okay, we see my character sort of like, reel back with their axe. We get a shot of torso up of them, like from below as I raise it up, and I'm going to come down and try and hit. It's just this little reminder of like, show us what's happening on screen. It's a narrative tool. It's a tool. It's a tool to use as a GM, as a game designer, and also as a player to tell us, like, yes, there are miniatures on the table, but that doesn't mean that is all that we need to know, right? Like, they don't tell the whole story, so let's tell the whole story. So yeah, those are some tools and techniques I've used before that seem to work.
Going off of that a little bit, I want to stress that tabletop RPGs, because it's not just, not just like text. You can use like, different mediums, like you can use pictures and minis and like, all these other different tools. It's like an expansive sort of medium where it's like, nothing is really fixed in terms of, what you're making together and what you're building together. You can like, go back, rewind, you can like, edit things as you see fit. And what you were saying, Spencer, reminds me of this game that I'm working on right now with Austin Knight and Amanda Call, called Damos Academy, which is like this coloring book. And it's like a coloring book. And as you're going through like different rooms, you're like, going through the different spaces and you're collecting items. And you can see everything before you. You can see like the different rooms and like what they look like in front of you, but how you edit things in the room and how you like, color things in, or how you like, answer questions or edit text, that changes. So it's like a really malleable medium.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, right, it's all coming from our imagination in some way. And so the more tools we have at our disposal to do that, the better. But making sure that players don't get lost in like we can see it on the table already, so we don't have a need to it can become very wargamey without having descriptions, it feels like sometimes.
It's all good to kind of just see the different perspectives that you all have when it comes to trying to decide how to do the show don't tell. And obviously that's like a huge keystone in world building, is just displaying things out. But it's just kind of fun to see the different perspectives on how to take a world and push into it. And we're at a point in the panel where we've got about a few minutes left. If this was a real place, it'd be like 10 minutes left, kind of like holding up the card set.
We got the red light.
We get the red light.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I thought would be fun for this panel, because I knew that we could talk a lot too, but I also know it's fun. Let's do our own show don't tell. And Spencer, with your permission, I'm actually going to pull out some Icarus cards.
Hell yeah, let's do it.
Let's do a little world building. I'm going to go away right now.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
For those of you who don't know what Icarus is, it's a storytelling game about the fall of a great civilization, and you build out together the like utopia that you're starting from. And there are cards that come out that help you to sort of imagine that world together with your players before you begin. Oh, look, there it is. And so we have cards that come out that give you prompts that allow you to like start to build that world together before you watch
so
it.
we're just going to ask a few questions. We're just going to make a little dying civilization.
Hell yeah.
Right now.
Oh, I'm here for it.
Because it would be a fun thing to do. And I think I'd like to start by just having one of you pick the genre, the theme we're going to be in. Like, no matter what, we're going to just make the civilization. It has a monument in the center, right? It's just there's something in there that's dedicated to something. And there's a whole lot more around this game than just, building a monument around it. There's a lot more involved, but the cards are kind of what I'm interested in kind of getting you all prompt into at the moment. But who would like to take a stab at where we would like our little civilization to be at? It can be sci-fi, it can be fantasy. I can also just start us off if that would be easier for everyone as well too.
Let's do horror.
Okay, you want to do some horror genres? So what kind of era should we play horror in, Tanya? Like, should we be Victorian? Should we be sci-fi? Should we be fantasy? Is this Victorian or?
Let's do Victorian or not Prohibition era, Victorian horror.
Okay, so let's do a Victorian horror, right? All right, so that's where we're going to lay in. We're going to stay there. It's horror themed. It's in Victorian. Banana, I'm going to give you the first question. All right. So this little town, and I'm going to replace Icarus here. So we're going to give a name. Actually, Tanya, would you give me the names? Well, you came up with the Victorian horror place. What's our village called? What's our little township? It can't involve black birds sitting on, perches. Can't be dove perch.
Dang it. Alantera.
Ontera? Okay.
Ontera, Alantera.
Alantera. Okay.
Alantera is really cool.
Alantera. All right. So the village of Alantera. Banana, there's a controversial part of the Alanteran culture that other surrounding villages don't agree with or share. What is it?
So I think Alantera is the people that live there are nocturnal and they do not trade with other towns, and they don't do business anytime in the day because they're all sleeping in the daytime.
So they only do merchant transactions at nights. Like if you want to come to Alteran to trade, it must be in the evening. That's not terrifying. That sounds great. So, Spencer.
Yeah.
Speaking of festivals, all right, I'm going to give you the festival card. All right, there is an unpopular subculture of Alterans within the city that hold a festival, and some members of the community have tried to show up and shut it down. What is this unpopular subculture in the city, and why is it looked down upon?
Yeah, so I think that the people on Terra, there's a group, an unpopular group that that create marionette puppets out of the dead.
Okay.
And the festival is basically they bring them down Main Street and marionette them so that they are back alive again. And it's sort of like a festival of the dead. Right, where they're bringing them back. And I think the people of I think some of the people that are in like the churches and things here, they do not agree with this in any way. And so
because they're exhuming corpses.
They're literally pulling people off graveyards to do this, I think. And so and they're probably digging them up in the church's graveyard, right? Like they're buried there and they go in there and steal these corpses and reanimate them in a really creepy way. And so I think that there's often whenever this festival happens, there's often this clash of of the people from the church of Montera and the and
the marionetters, right?
Yeah, the marionetters,
So,
yeah.
or the string weavers, maybe, or something.
Yeah,
like
the string
that.
weavers is cool.
So Tanya, since we have established that Alterans only do business at night, and there are these string weavers who walk through the crowds in order to celebrate a festival, like I would actually say, like what is Alteran known for? Why do people come to trade? Like why is there even a desire to even come into this town at this point? What is a valuable item that this city has to offer the world around it?
I'd say one of two things. One, their wine is known worldwide.
Okay, their wine makes sense.
Their wine and also some of their fabrics, which is unbeknownst to the rest of the world, is made from the shrouds of those that are dug up for this festival.
Oh,
shit.
All right. So the string weave. So there's like a secret luxury good that the string weavers make from the robe of the dead, as well as the more like top of the line, like Alteran wine is world renowned. So people come in with their horse-drawn carriages into the middle of the night to come grab this wine and then bring it back out of the city. But then they're smuggling out this unique fabric as well too.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That is so
really
cool. Banana, let's see, let's go get a little deeper. All right. So the string weavers, or a subculture within this community, has recently gained some political prominence and has begun to actively oppress another group inside of the city. Who is this new oppressor and why are they being oppressed?
So I think that the string weavers, they have a leader who is who's famous for embalming. Who's great for, who's a great embalmer. I don't know the proper term for that, sorry.
A mortician.
A mortician. Yeah. And specifically, they want to continue doing this practice, right? They want to continue, with this festival and, having people doing their marionette dance in the middle of the town. But
I love that it's a dance. That's even more terrifying.
I don't know why I assumed it was a dance. Maybe it's not.
No, it's absolutely a dance. Are you kidding me? Yeah.
But there's a small group of people who would rather cremate, their dead, and instead of having, family members sit at dinner with them, who are all like fully embalmed and just like, hanging out at dinner, passed away family members, they would rather have like, their family members cremated and just like, do that whole thing.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, exactly. Just like forget about it. Like, let's just like
instead of that like mortis photography. When I had to do Dread, I had to do research so much about mortis photography because that was a heavy theme in the game about how people, in order to remember their dead before burying them, would embalm them and take photos of them. Right. I mean, it makes sense at the time, right? Because you have nothing to remember your loved ones by, and photography was recently new. So it's like, yeah, of course we're going to take a picture of our like openly dead-eyed family members. But holy, yeah, this is terrifying.
Yeah, there was a book that I ran across at a bookstore the other day that was just a book of pictures of like.
We lost him. He's gone. So I'm assuming it's pictures of the dead. So he is now literally a mortis right there. And we have a perfect photo of Spenser, who is no longer with us. But we can finish your thought though, Banana, because I know I kind of interrupted and I apologize. But yeah, there are people who want to now burn their dead and not keep them alive. So I guess you could say, is that why they're being looked down upon? Is that why they're being oppressed by the string weavers?
Because their thinking is sort of controversial in the way that they would rather just remove all evidence of like, this family member. Let's just move on. Let's just not even, think about them, versus like the other kind of thinking where it's like, we have to have them, there with us forever.
Right. Okay. Well, now we have lost Spenser. Tanya, the question's going to go straight to you. Then you get it right back in. A force of nature strikes the city in a single night of terror. What happens, and how does it exhibit one of the city's major strengths?
Ooh. A rival town has magic.
A rival town is magic. Okay.
A rival
right.
town has magic. And they deeply disagree with the way that the Alantarans live. And instead of just showing up with pitchforks, knives, things like that, they unleash a plague of locusts.
A plague of locusts. Okay.
And those locusts also get into the luxury fabric
And eat it away.
eat it away, and that really cripples their economy, their secret economy.
Okay, so welcome back, Spencer. We had a single night of terror in which a rival town has decided to use magic in order to unleash a plague of locusts on the Alterans and not only eat away the secret economy, but also just, I'm assuming they're biting insects, Tanya, or is
Oh yeah, they're anyone who is unfortunate enough to be out and about doing business, since they only do business in the evening, is descended upon. The locusts eat any crops that are blooming. They have a good time harassing the Alterans, and a lot of people just flee in terror, leaving everything as they left it. And when the sun rises, there's just dead locusts gnawed upon people with insect bites.
Oh, ouch. And just welts and torn up fabric everywhere. Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yo,
Yep.
I leave for like 2 seconds. What? What? My internet went out. I'm so sorry. I'm on my phone now because my internet
Yeah, we
just
can see.
completely disappeared.
We
So,
want you to get that point of view of the locusts coming in, Spencer, as they run in to get into it. Well, I will give you the final question, and then we will hand over this panel to the next amazing event here at the D4 conference. But yeah, I think the final one will be from the final hours. And this applies directly to what Tanya was just saying about the secret resources starting to fall apart. With many of the city's resources, dwindling resources, still going to the continuous building of this monument, which we haven't really described what the monument to Icarus is, but we'll just continue to say like the infrastructure of the city, right?
Yeah.
Like it's being fed to its wealthy. A plot emerges to sabotage its construction. What is the plan? And honestly, who is the group leading it of our many groups now?
yeah, I think so I think that the tower in the center, sort of the infrastructure, the foundation of this place, is this massive sort of it's a tower that is being built that stores these barrels of wine.
Is it, or is it the mausoleum of the dead? Maybe like that was.
I was thinking maybe the mausoleum, but I think that because that subculture in the beginning was not as celebrated, they were not as celebrated. I think that maybe
it's the wine
reason
barrel.
why people come here is because of the wine, and so we actually have this massive kind of fountain in the center of the huge kind of it pours down each level, and it is just this incredible wine.
It's a wine.
Yeah, and people can just go and fill their glasses with it. And so I think that that is drawing a lot of these people from outside of our city to this. They're bringing them here, right? Because everybody wants to get their wine from the fountain. Everybody wants to pay to take some of that wine home, because I think maybe it's being pumped in from this massive cavernous, what is that called? Reservoir. Yeah, of wine underneath the city. So we're aging it underneath the city and then piping it up into this fountain where it flows out. And that is the draw for a lot of outside people to come here. And there's the group that I think is more traditionally minded here, who want this place to be the same as it has always been, and
we've just recently like started opening doors for people to come in, because Banana, you were saying that we don't trade that much with other people, but now people are starting to come in with this wine. So I think that we're starting to see this influx of visitors, maybe even visitors that are coming during the day and waking us up, right, from our slumber to like get this. They aren't paying attention to get the wine. They aren't paying attention to the rules, and people are making sales in that daytime because they're able to make money. And so I think the plot is to destroy the tower, this fountain.
Can the wine be made of people?
The wine is made of people.
That's at the plot.
Absolutely.
Oh man.
Yeah, for sure. It's Soylent Green. The wine is made of people.
I mean, I would also potentially, because one of the great points about Icarus is that we like can keep adding to these elements, right? I think these bodies are just marinating now inside of the wine, and it's basically they're in the reservoir, and this is part of it. And because there's so much, the Altarans, there's so much chaos between the string weavers and the traditionalists and the Plague of Locusts. At post Plague of Locusts, I think people are seeing a crack in the economy and they're just rushing for it. And since the fountain was always kind of open and available for people to take anyway, basically people are Black Friday rushing the fountain to get as much wine as possible and get out of the town.
But little do they know, little do they know that there have been bodies put into the reservoir that have been poisoning the wine in some way.
Oh so no, that's the flavor.
Oh boy.
I hate it even more. We're really taught in this city, and I'm here for it.
So not only is the downfall of Altaran come from the plot of marinating the corpses of the dead inside of this reservoir of wine, but now all of the outerlying territories and everyone else that the wine is shipped out from is not only sick, but a plague spreads across the land as a result of this awful plot between the traditionalists and the string weavers inside of the town. And that is where we'll end our panel today for all of you. I really sincerely appreciate all three of you taking the time to come into this together. It was wonderful to not only talk about world building, but then have a fun little exercise in our own show Don't Tell as well too in this process. So thank you, everyone. If you want to, we'll do a quick outro just to remind everybody who you are, where they can find you, and we will hand this off to the next amazing panel.
I'll start. My name's Tanya. You can find me everywhere online, Cypher of Tears, CYPHEROFTYR. If you're interested into the Motherlands, that is Motherlands RPG, and on my Twitch channel every Wednesday night at 4 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Central. And again, everywhere Cypher of Tears.
Banana.
Hi, thanks again for having me. I'm Banana, and you can find me on Twitter, Instagram at BananaChan Games, and you can find my company, Game and a Curry, at Game and a Curry on both Instagram and Twitter. Jiangshi the Banquet Hall is a game that Sanfeng Lim and I have designed, and it's the Kickstarter is over, but you can still order the PDF on DriveThru RPG, and I believe the physical release is coming out sometime in the summer, so June, July-ish.
And then I'm Spencer Stark. You can find the stuff that I make through Hunters Entertainment, Alice is Missing, Icarus, and Kids on Brooms. Thanks again for having me and for dealing with my phone. The last half of this being on my phone, I really appreciate it. Sorry about that.
Oh, great.
Totally gone.
Fine. And I'm Ivan Van Norman. I'm your moderator for today. I like making games so much. I have two publishing companies, Hunters Entertainment, in which I go and make great games like Spencer's talking about with Alice is Missing, the Altered Carbon role-playing game, and a bunch of other awesome stuff. Currently working on Gods of Metal Ragnarok, an epic heavy metal fantasy role-playing game in which you take on positions and tones in which to embody the metal gods and bring glory to the world of Ragnarok. and the head of Darrington Press, Critical Role's publishing company, which by the time this video drops, which should be early June-ish, Okotoa, the first board game that is a cooperative, semi-cooperative tile-laying game in which the Great Sea Leviathan is eating up your ship and you must be the last one to survive, should be out in stores now on both the critroll.com shop as well as a friendly local game store near you. So thank you all.
It's so fun.
It's so fun.
Woohoo!
It's so fun.
And the art's amazing, so go
Yeah.
support it. It's amazing. But thank you all, and we'll see you all on the internet. And thank you again, D4, for inviting us all out for this amazing San Diego Comic-Con sponsored tabletop conference, which we now have, which is pretty fun, right? So, all right, take care, everybody.